So, good evening and welcome back. And I wanted to really take a few minutes right now to discuss the recent apology by Jay Leno uh, in relations to the Asian Americans and his long-standing use of jokes and using ethnic jokes, in particular Koreans, but uh, overall the using of joking as a way of getting cheap laughs uh, with racism. And what I wanted in here for me today is to one is to think about the uh, apology itself. And he says Jay Leno apologizes for decades of jokes about Asians. And he said, in my heart, I knew it was wrong. And the question that arises for us is um, when did he realize that his jokes really were wrong? Was it from the beginning or just recently, the past few days? Again, this is the issue that raises the questions about all these people coming out right now to express an apology for saying and racist jokes about Asians. But also, you have a whole series of jokes that targeted individuals in the past. Uh, this was part of a gathering that was held by Media Action Network for Asian Americans. He said at the time there was a prevailing attitude that some groups is always complaining about something, so don't worry about it. Whenever we received the complaint, there would be two sides to the discussion. Either we need to deal with this, or screw him if they can't take a joke. So this is again is this notion of trying to balance or saying uh, that this is only a joke and people are complaining. Basically, there's two sides to the issue. He said too many times I sided with the latter, even when in my heart I knew it was wrong. He said, this is why I'm issuing this apology. I don't consider this particular case to be another example of cancel culture, but a legitimate wrong that was done on my part. And in here, we welcome Jay Leno's apology. It's better late than never, but we're expecting much more than just a simple apology. He says, in my heart, I knew it was wrong, uh, but in general, knowing or feeling that it is wrong does not cut it for us overall, considering that for so many years there was fun, money to be made, fame, and in essence, getting cheap laughs for this occasion. But what I wanted to really contextualize what I was talking about with in the more of a discussion of Orientalism, a little bit on to understand what is Orientalism. It is a regularized manner of writing, vision, and study dominated by ideological biases suited to the Orient. It is the image of the Orient. It's not a school of thought, rather, it is a pattern of representation of the other. So rather than only think about Jay Leno apology as an isolated aspect of it, but rather to think about the whole repertoire of Orientalism. And Orientalism in here referring to the uh, important Edward Said's work that focused and theorized about this issue. What we need to understand is Orientalism is a manner of regularized writing, vision, and study dominated by imperative perspectives and ideological biases, ostensibly suited to the Orient. It is the image of the Orient expressed as an entire system of thought and scholarship, but also and media production. So when we talk about media production itself, we need to really understand that media production represent and tend to reflect this Orientalism. Two terms to really be familiar with is latent Orientalism and manifest Orientalism. Latent Orientalism is all the ideas, the materials that we get in our minds over generations, from cartoons to stories to narratives to movies, that constitute our latent Orientalism. And manifest Orientalism is that which we act upon when the occasion occurs. And again, this is using Freud's the subconscious and the conscious in the same way, that it is the subconscious is the depository that is often the conscious acts upon, or at least is drives or draws upon. So Edward Said is saying we must really understand latent Orientalism, or the whole repertoire of Orientalism that makes it possible for this production to take place. More importantly, Edward Said is saying that culture matter and cultural production matter. Uh, so rather than to think that Jay Leno just recently discovered that he was wrong in terms of racism, is to think about the whole wealth of repertoire in cultural production, in the movies, in Hollywood, in the TV shows, in all types of representation that often have sought to laugh at the expense or to produce image of the other constantly in the negative, generation after generation. So you don't need only to think of the Atlanta shooting relative to Asian Americans and that they are targeted, but you could go all the way back into a long history of this, from the Chinese Exclusionary Act that targeted the Chinese, to the Japanese internment, to the problematizing and targeting of the Vietnamese during the Vietnam War, the Koreans, back to the Japanese, back to the Chinese, and then you talk about Cambodia, and now we're back again to China. So this is a long history of racism embedded culturally and is activated through the cultural repertoire on a regular basis. So while Jay Leno's apology is a welcome apology in the sense of him, but there's much more that needs to be done for us to undo that latent Orientalism, that latent racism that continue to inform how we act on a, or how people act on a regular basis. And there's a whole host of that material that is out there. So I just wanted to be with you for a few minutes for us to really say there is much more that needs to be done, that there is a distinct difference between using racism and racist terminology to get a cheap laugh, which is a form of bullying, public bullying directed at minorities, Asian Americans, and others. And this is a form of taunting. Yes, somebody can laugh, and often those who gather around to get a cheap laugh over these bullying that comes often from this public discourse, that we need to actually do better, and we urge and call on everyone to do better and to hold ourselves to the highest standards. So this is my brief talk today, is to speak of Jay Leno's apology in relation to Orientalism, and it is time for us to continue to challenge those who use Orientalism, racism, discrimination as a way to try to posit themselves in positions of prominence and influence. So thank you, and I'll see you again next time. So continue to tune in, share this with others if you find it interesting.